The road up to Harrington Mountain Lodge was the kind that made you grip the wheel with both hands and pray the borrowed tires had enough tread left. Clara had been driving for nearly 4 hours, and the last 30 minutes had been nothing but ice, pine shadows, and a guardrail that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the previous decade. The heater rattled. The radio had given out somewhere around mile marker 40. She was alone with the sound of her own breathing and the low scrape of the cedar box shifting under the passenger seat every time the car hit a rut. She hadn't opened it yet. 6 weeks since her mother's death, and she still hadn't opened it. Clara pressed her thumb against the steering wheel's cracked leather and said out loud, "To no one, you are a professional. You are good at this. You are exactly what they need." She didn't quite believe it, but she said it again anyway. The lodge appeared around a bend the way a verdict appears in a courtroom. Sudden, final, impossible to argue with. It was enormous. 3 stories of grey stone with narrow windows that threw no light, a peaked roof dusted with early November snow, and twin stone chimneys that exhaled nothing. A row of iron lanterns lined the motor court, their flames small and indifferent in the mountain wind. Clara parked the car, sat for a moment and smoothed the front of her coat, a charcoal wool she'd bought second-hand 2 winters ago and had been meaning to replace ever since. She did not replace it. She got out. Inside, the entrance hall smelled of wood smoke and something older, pine resin and cold stone, the particular stillness of a house that had been expensive for a very long time. An antler chandelier hung 30 feet above the marble floor, its candle-shaped bulbs burning at half strength. Staff moved through doorways without making eye contact, carrying things, going places, not looking at her. Then Margaret Harrington came down the staircase. She was 64 years old and dressed as if someone important was about to photograph her. Dark wool, pearls, silver hair swept back without a strand out of place. She moved slowly, not because she was old, but because she had never been in a hurry in her life. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at Clara the way a buyer at an auction looks at something she's already decided she doesn't want but might purchase out of necessity. Her eyes moved from Clara's face to her coat. They stayed on the coat for just a moment too long. "Miss Whitfield," Margaret said. "Yes. Hello, Mrs. Harrington. I know who you are." She did not extend a hand. "You are here for Lily. You are not here for anything else. Is that understood?" "Yes," Clara said. "Completely." "Good." Margaret turned toward a woman standing near the hallway, a staff member Clara hadn't noticed. "Show her to her room." And that was the end of it. No welcome. No instructions about Lily. No mention of Edward. Margaret walked away, her heels precise on the marble, and Clara stood in the middle of that enormous entrance hall with her one suitcase and the echo of the word room still hanging in the air. Her room was in the service corridor, narrow, functional, a single window that faced the back of the property, and a heating vent that knocked softly every few minutes like a restless neighbor. The bed was fine, the mattress was not. Clara sat on it, heard it protest, and decided it didn't matter. She put the cedar box on the nightstand, still locked. She turned the light off and lay down in her coat. She found Lily 2 hours later, not because anyone told her where to look, but because she noticed the thin strip of light under the door at the end of the east wing hallway and thought it was strange. She knocked softly. No answer. She opened the door an inch. The room was dark except for the light from the hallway. Lily was sitting on the floor near the door, cross-legged, a spiral notebook open in her lap. 8 years old, dark hair. Her father's lodge gifted to her in miniature, same set of the jaw, same watchful eyes. She was drawing a horse, not looking up. Clara didn't say anything. She sat down on the floor beside her, leaned her back against the wall, and watched. Lily kept drawing. The horse had 4 legs, a long mane, and was mid-gallop, going somewhere urgent. Clara thought it was the best drawing she'd seen in a very long time. She still didn't speak. After a minute, Lily shifted the notebook a half-inch toward her. Just enough so Clara could see better. "That's a good horse," Clara said quietly. Lily didn't answer, but she didn't move the notebook back. Clara walked back to her room at 10:15, more tired than she'd felt in weeks. She brushed her teeth, turned off the light, and was almost asleep when she heard it. Footsteps in the service corridor, stopping just outside her door. A pause. Then, very slowly, the sound of the handle turning. Testing, not pushing. Patient. Then nothing. Footsteps retreating down the hall. Clara lay completely still in the dark, her hand pressed flat against the mattress, and listened to the silence that followed. Morning came the way it does in the mountains. Taku, without warning, without apology. One moment the windows were black, and the next they were white, with reflected snow, and the lodge was already awake around her. Clara could hear pipes in the walls, the distant clang of something heavy in the kitchen below, the particular creak of the second-floor landing that she had memorized on her first night without meaning to. She dressed quickly and found Mrs. Paulette Greer in the service corridor at 7, moving through it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had mapped every inch of this house in the dark. "There are things you need to know," Mrs. Greer said, without turning around. She handed Clara a mug of coffee, black, no warning, and kept walking. "Keep up, please." Clara kept up. Second floor east corridor. Mrs. Greer's voice was flat, factual, as if she were reading from a manual. "You do not go there unless Mrs. Harrington herself summons you, not to retrieve Lily, not to look for a lost toy, not for any reason. And Dr. Osei? You do not approach Dr. Osei. If he wants to speak to you, he'll find you." A brief pause. "He's not unfriendly, he's just careful. You understand the difference." Clara understood the difference. "And Mr. Harrington's sweeter." Mrs. Greer stopped walking and turned around. She was a compact woman in her mid-60s with silver hair pinned back so tightly it seemed to hold her whole expression in place. She looked at Clara for a moment without speaking, and in that moment Clara felt the full weight of what this house had asked of everyone who worked inside it. "Never," Mrs. Greer said. "Not alone, not ever. Do you understand?" "Yes," Clara said. "I understand." Mrs. Greer nodded once and turned back down the corridor. "Lily has breakfast at 7:30. She likes her eggs without pepper. Last Nanny gave her pepper by accident on day 3 and we didn't hear the end of it until day 7. She paused. "Well, until she left." Clara didn't ask how she had left. She filed it away and drank her coffee. Lily was already at the kitchen table when Clara arrived, drawing something in pencil on the corner of a paper napkin. She didn't look up, but she shifted her juice glass slightly to make room. A small, unconscious hospitality that struck Clara as the saddest generous thing she had ever seen. After breakfast, Clara said, "Do you want to go outside?" Lily looked up. For a moment her expression did something complicated, like a door that wasn't sure whether it wanted to open. Then she put down her pencil and pushed back her chair. The meadow behind the lodge was buried under nearly a foot of snow, undisturbed except for the long drag marks of a pine branch the wind had pulled across it overnight. The cold hit Clara's face like a clean slap. Lily stood beside her on the back step, bundled in a red wool coat 2 sizes too large, and looked at all that white space with an expression Clara couldn't quite name. Then Lily ran, not walked, ran, full tilt, both arms out, her boots punching through the snow crust with a sound like crumpling paper. She made it halfway across the meadow before she spun around, arms still out, face tilted up toward the flat gray-white sky. Clara stood at the edge of the step and pressed her mittened hands together hard. Her throat had done something she hadn't expected, gone tight and sharp all at once, because she was thinking of her mother, of Donna, who used to open the back door of their small Ohio house on the first snow of every year and say, "Go on then, the world is clean again." And Clara had run the same way, with the same arms, toward the same white space, and it had felt like a gift she hadn't done anything to deserve. She turned away before Lily could see her face. She breathed in cold air that smelled of pine resin and nothing else, and she held it there in her chest until she could feel her expression settle back into something manageable. That evening, Margaret Harrington sent for her. The lodge library was warm and dim, lit by 2 standing lamps that cast everything in amber. Margaret sat behind a wide oak desk as though it were a judicial bench. She was wearing dark gray, her silver hair perfect, her posture the kind that announced it had never once in 64 years considered slouching. She slid 2 sheets of paper across the desk without a word. Clara read them carefully, every word: dietary restrictions, Lily's approved topics of conversation, her sleep schedule, her medical notes, her reading list. And there, near the bottom of the second page, a clause that had been typed in a slightly smaller font, as if hoping not to be noticed. The caregiver agrees to refrain from forming personal attachments that may confuse the child's understanding of her family structure and appropriate familial hierarchy. Clara looked up. Margaret was watching her with those pale, precise eyes. "Everything clear?" Margaret asked. "Perfectly," Clara said. She picked up the pen from the desk and signed her name at the bottom. Her handwriting was steady. She was proud of that. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. You may go." She made it out of the library and into the corridor before her hands started shaking. The pen slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a small hollow sound, and she stood there looking at it for a full 3 seconds before she could make herself bend down to pick it up. She straightened, pressed her back against the wall, and breathed, one breath then another, until the shaking slowed. She made the last Nanny sign that too. Clara's head came up. Dr. Rose was passing through the far end of the corridor, his white coat open, a tablet tucked under one arm. He didn't stop walking. He didn't look at her directly. He spoke almost as if he were thinking aloud. "The one before you," he said. "She lasted 9 days." Clara watched Dr. Rose disappear around the corner. His footsteps faded. The corridor was quiet again, just the hiss of heat through the vents and the weight of that unsigned document still in her hand. 9 days. She'd been here 2 weeks. She was already living on borrowed time. She folded the papers without signing them, tucked them into her cardigan pocket, and went to find Lily. Lily was in the library when Clara pushed the door open. The girl had pulled a chair directly under the window and was sitting with her knees drawn up, watching snow fall through the glass. She didn't turn around. "Hey," Clara said softly. "Dinner's in 20 minutes. Lily nodded. Then, after a long pause, the kind that Clara had learned to wait through without filling, she said, "Would you read to my father?" Clara stopped moving. "I'm sorry." Lily still didn't turn. "Not to me, to him." Her voice was careful and even, like she'd been rehearsing it. "He used to read before bed, every night, and nobody does anymore." Clara crossed the room slowly and sat in the chair beside her. Outside, the pine trees were bending under the weight of new snow. One branch dipped low, then sprang back, scattering white in every direction. "What did he read?" Clara asked. "Big books?" Lily finally looked at her. "Old ones." Clara glanced at the shelves behind them. The library ran the full length of the east wall, floor to ceiling. On the second shelf from the bottom, the spines were worn and cracked with use. She stood and ran her finger along them until it caught on something. A paperback so old the cover had been taped back on. "The Count of Monte Cristo." She pulled it out. "Like this?" Lily looked at it for a moment. Then she slipped off the chair. "After dinner," she said, and walked out of the library. Edward Harrington's bedroom suite was warmer than the rest of the lodge. It smelled like antiseptic and something underneath that, cedar, maybe, from the furniture, or from whatever he'd kept in the room before all of these. The equipment along the wall hummed and clicked in steady rhythm. The ventilator, the monitors, the IV stand catching the low light. He lay in the center of the bed, looking like a man who had simply chosen not to wake up. His chest rose and fell with the machine. His left hand rested open on the blanket. Clara sat in the chair closest to him and held the book open on her knee. Lily had climbed onto the foot of the bed without asking anyone's permission and curled there, her back against the footboard, her socks pulled up over her leggings. "Go ahead," Lily said. Clara cleared her throat. She found the first page, and she read. She read about a young sailor and a stolen future and a dungeon that felt like the end of everything. She read slowly, the way she used to read to her mother in the last weeks, not performing it, just delivering it, word by word. The ventilator kept its own rhythm beneath her voice. Lily's breathing gradually slowed and steadied. Clara was an hour in when she finally stopped and looked up. Lily had fallen asleep against the footboard, one arm hanging loose over the edge of the mattress. She was about to close the book when she noticed it. Edward's left hand, the one that had been open on the blanket, was now closed. Not gripped, not clenched, just folded in, gently, like a man catching something in his sleep. Clara stared at it. The monitor above his head traced the same steady line. The ventilator breathed for him. Nothing had changed. She told herself it was involuntary. She told herself that all the way down the hall. She told herself the same thing the next night when it happened again, and the night after that. On the third night she looked up from a page and saw Dr. Osea standing in the doorway. He wasn't reading anything, he wasn't carrying his tablet. He was just watching. When her eyes met his, he gave a small nod, not a greeting exactly, more like acknowledgement, and stepped back into the hall. After Lily was asleep and Clara had carried her back to the east wing, she found him still there, leaning against the wall outside Edward's door, with his arms crossed. "His EEG," he said without preamble. "It's been shifting for 2 weeks. The patterns we're seeing are consistent with increasing awareness." Clara leaned against the opposite wall. Her heart was beating too fast and she made herself keep her voice level. "Does Margaret know?" "She knows there have been changes." He paused. "She's asked me not to update the family's legal team until I'm certain." "What does certain mean to a neurologist?" Dr. Rose looked at her for a long moment. The hall light hummed above them. Down the corridor, a clock ticked. "In this house," he said quietly, "it means whatever Mrs. Harrington needs it to mean." He walked away without another word. Clara stood there until she couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. Back in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed and reached underneath it. Her fingertips found the cedar box, smooth sides, the small brass latch still cold. She pulled it out and set it on the mattress beside her. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, and they shook anyway. She sat there looking at the box for a long moment, the brass latch glinting under the lamp. Then she slid it back under the bed, turned off the light, and lay down fully dressed in the dark. The wind came off the mountain around midnight, not the soft kind, but the kind that found every gap in the old lodge walls and pushed through like it was looking for something. Clara was already awake. She'd been walking the service corridor in wool socks, too restless to sleep, carrying nothing. Then she heard it, a hard crack from the library, followed by a rolling sound, like something heavy finding the edge of a table and losing. She pushed the library door open. The tall reading lamp beside the writing desk had tipped over. Its brass base had caught the corner of the desk's lower drawer, the locked one, the narrow one she'd dusted around every morning for 2 weeks, and sprung it open at an angle. Pages of correspondence had fanned out across the floor. The lamp's bulb had survived. It was still on, casting everything sideways and amber. Clara set the lamp upright. She gathered the papers, bank letterhead, stamped dates she didn't read, and placed them back in the drawer. Then she noticed the envelope. It was at the bottom, face up, sealed with plain wax, no stamp, no postmark. Her name was on the front, not the nanny, not Miss Whitfield. Her full name, in dark ink, in handwriting that pressed hard into the paper like the person writing it had been very careful to get every letter right. Clara Ann Whitfield. She picked it up, she turned it over. She read the front again. The library smelled like old paper and pine resin, and the wind was still working at the windows, and she stood there in wool socks on the cold floor for a long time. She did not open it there. Back in her room, she sat cross-legged on the narrow bed with the envelope in her lap and the cedar box pulled out from underneath. The small brass key was on the nightstand. She'd been carrying it in her pocket for 5 days without quite knowing why. She looked at the envelopes sealed back. Then, on instinct, she couldn't have explained, she pressed the key against the wax seal. It didn't unlock anything, but it fit the envelope's proportions the same way it fit the box. The same slight heaviness, the same oval grip. Her mother had given her the key to more than one thing without saying so. She broke the seal with her thumbnail. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on plain white paper, dated 3 years ago. The handwriting was the same as the envelope, careful, even, trained. "My name is Edward Harrington III, it began. I am writing this because I cannot mail it. Not yet. I don't have enough proof to send it without risking that you'd dismiss it, and you would have every reason to. So I'm leaving it where I think you might eventually find it. If you ever come to the lodge, I believe you will." Clara read slowly. She read each paragraph twice. The letter was not emotional. That was the first thing she noticed. It read the way a bank file reads: dates, sources, confirmed details, things he could verify and things he couldn't. He had been searching for 11 years. He'd hired 2 private investigators. He had a name, Clara Ann, from a nurse at a hospital in Columbus, who remembered a birth that was handled quietly in the winter, 26 years before the letter was written. He had the name of the adoption agency his mother had used. It had been dissolved 4 years later, its records sealed. There was a paragraph near the end that read differently from the rest. The handwriting changed slightly, the letters got bigger. "Our mother told me you died. She told me this when I was 27, after I found the first record. She cried. I believed her. It took me 3 more years to understand that she doesn't cry at real losses, only at threats. By then, I had your name. I couldn't find an address. I'm sorry it took this long. I am sorry about all of it." Clara sat with the last page in her hand. She looked at the cedar box. She used the key. The latch opened the way it always did. Small, clean click. Inside, on top of her mother Donna's folded letters, was a photograph she had never seen before. Old, slightly creased along one edge. A hospital entrance, grey stone steps, a glass door propped open. A young woman stood holding a newborn against her chest. The woman was maybe 25, 26. Dark hair pulled back. A coat too thin for a November morning. She was looking directly at the camera with an expression that was not grief and not love and not relief. Just a fixed, deliberate blankness, like she had already decided what this moment would cost her and had agreed to the price. Clara recognized the cheekbones before she recognized anything else. Then she recognized everything. She turned the photograph face down on the floor beside her. She sat like that for a long time, not moving, while the fire in the lodge's main hearth popped and settled 2 floors below her. That sound, the distant, rhythmic crack of burning wood, was the only thing that felt real. She read Edward's letter again, then again. The 4th time through, she read it slowly, mouthing the words the way she used to mouth her way through hard passages in school. His handwriting was small and even, a man who was used to signing documents. He had written, "I have been looking for you since I was 28 years old. Mother told me you died. I no longer believe anything Mother has told me." Clara set the letter down against her knee. She picked up Donna's last letter, the one written from the hospital bed, the paper thin enough to see light through. Donna's handwriting had changed by then. Bigger. Shakiness at the end of each line. But the words were clear. "The woman who gave you to me was frightened and powerful, and she will not want to be found. But Edward will. Find Edward." First, Clara had read that sentence 6 weeks ago and thought it was the morphine talking. She thought about the social worker, a woman named Patrice, who had known Donna for 30 years, who had called Clara 2 weeks after the funeral and said, carefully, "I know this is a hard time, but there is a posting you should see, a live-in position, a little girl who needed consistency, a remote location, good pay, immediate start." Donna had arranged it. Clara understood that now with the flat, irrefutable certainty of arithmetic. Donna had known, maybe not everything, maybe not the letter, but she had known enough. She had spent 30 years protecting Clara from this, and then, when she knew she was dying, she had spent whatever strength she had left pointing Clara directly at it. Clara pressed her thumb against the corner of Donna's letter until she felt the edge of it. Then she put everything back in the cedar box, closed it, and slid it under the floorboard beneath her bed. She did not sleep. By the time grey light came through the window, the lodge had begun its morning sounds. Footsteps in the kitchen, the coffee grinder, loud, industrial, 3 short bursts. Clara washed her face with cold water and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for exactly 3 seconds, then went to find Lily. Lily was already sitting up in bed, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, looking at a picture book she clearly wasn't reading. "Morning," Clara said. "Morning." Lily looked up. She tilted her head. "You look like you've been crying." Clara opened her mouth. "No," she said. Her voice broke on the word. "Just slightly. Just enough." Lily watched her with the careful, patient attention of a child who had learned that adults sometimes needed a moment. Clara crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Let's do your hair. Do you want 1 braid or 2? "1, Lily said. "Down the side." Like last time." Clara worked slowly, sectioning Lily's hair with her fingers, feeling the warmth of the child's head against her palms. Lily sat very still. She smelled like the lavender soap from the upstairs bathroom. "Clara." "Do you think my dad can hear the snow?" Clara kept braiding. "I think he can hear more than we know." Lily considered this. "Okay," she said, as though that were enough. Breakfast was served in the east dining room. Margaret was already seated when they came in, a cup of coffee in front of her and a newspaper she wasn't reading folded to one side. She was dressed impeccably, charcoal wool, a single strand of pearls. She looked like someone who had slept 8 hours and owned the fact of it. Clara poured Lily's orange juice and sat down. She could feel Margaret watching her. That gaze, she had felt it every morning for 2 weeks and filed it away as simple class contempt. The way wealthy women looked at stuff. But she understood it differently now. It wasn't contempt. It was surveillance. It was the perpetual, exhausting watchfulness of someone who had buried a secret and checked the ground above it every single day. Clara looked up. She met Margaret's eyes directly and held them. Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Not much. A fractional tightening around the mouth. She set her coffee cup down on the saucer with a small, precise click. "I think," she said, to no one in particular, her gaze drifting toward the window as if the thought had only just occurred to her. "It's time we reviewed the nanny's references more carefully." A pause. "I'll have Victor look into it." Lily kept eating her toast. The orange juice sat untouched in its glass. And Clara kept her face perfectly, carefully still, because she had understood, a half-second before Margaret said his name, exactly what was coming. He arrived on a Tuesday morning just after 9, when the frost on the motor court hadn't yet decided whether to melt. Clara heard the SUV before she saw it. A low, expensive engine cutting through the mountain quiet, tires crunching on gravel in a way that felt deliberate. She was at the east wing window with Lily, working through a multiplication worksheet, when the black vehicle pulled up and a man stepped out in a charcoal coat and leather gloves. "Who's that?" Lily asked. "I don't know," Clara said, which was not quite a lie. She knew the portfolio he carried before she could see his face clearly. She'd grown up watching her mother sit at the kitchen table with men who carried portfolios like that. Thick, dark leather, no visible logo, the kind that holds papers meant to finish something. Victor Sloan was pleasant, that was the first thing. He smiled at the housekeeper, thanked her for his coffee, called her by name even though he'd presumably only just learned it. He and Margaret disappeared into the east sitting room at 10 o'clock. Clara heard the door close. She did not hear anything after that. They came out at noon. Margaret walked past the library without looking in. Victor stopped in the doorway. "Miss Whitfield, do you have a few minutes?" The library smelled like wood polish and old paper. Victor sat across the desk from her, his portfolio open, a pen resting across the top. He had the kind of stillness that came from practicing it. "We've been conducting a standard background review," he said. "Routine for anyone working closely with the family. I want to be upfront with you." He paused as if that were a courtesy. "There's a gap in your employment history. 6 weeks between your previous position and your arrival here. That's raised some concern." Clara kept her voice even. "My mother died during those 6 weeks. Yes, I'm sorry for your loss." He said it the way people said it when they were not thinking about it. "The issue isn't the reason for the gap, it's that we weren't able to verify your activity during that period through the references you provided. What resolution are you proposing?" He slid a document across the desk. A single page, cleanly formatted. Clipped to the top was a check, a $3,000, written out in full. Clara picked it up. She read every line. The resignation was effective immediately. It cited a mutual agreement to part ways. It included a clause, small, at the bottom, in standard font, in which she agreed not to discuss the terms of her employment or her time at the lodge with any third party. She set it back down. "I'll need to think about it," she said. Victor's smile stayed exactly where it was. His eyes did not. Something shifted in them. Not surprise exactly. More like recalculation. "Of course," he said. "I'd ask that you let us know by Thursday morning." That night, Clara waited until the lodge was quiet. Lily was asleep. Dr. Rose had finished his late check and gone back to his station. The second-floor hallway was dark except for the small lamp left burning outside Edward's room. Clara had never gone in alone before. It had always been for Lily's sake. A reason to be there, a shield made of a child's need. Without Lily beside her, the room felt different, larger. The heart monitor beeped in slow, steady intervals. The air was warm and faintly medicinal. She sat in the chair beside the bed and unfolded the letter. Not the novel, his letter, the one written in his handwriting with her name on the envelope. She read it quietly, just above a whisper. When she reached the part near the end, she stopped reading and just talked. "You said you were sorry it took you so long," she told him. "I need you to wake up now. I need you to wake up before she makes me leave." The monitor beeped. The lamp in the corner threw a warm circle on the ceiling. Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees with a low, steady sound like breathing. She was folding the letter when she felt it. His left hand, the one that had been tightening for days, that Dr. Oze kept noting in his charts with careful, cautious language, moved sideways across the blanket. Slowly. The way something moves when the body is relearning intention. And then it closed around her wrist. She didn't move. His fingers were warm, warmer than she'd expected. She had expected the cool, passive weight of a sleeping hand. Not this. Not pressure, with intention behind it. "Edward," she said softly. The monitor kept its steady beat. Nothing else changed, but his hand did not let go. She sat there for another full minute before she made herself stand, made herself walk to the door. She did not run, but she moved fast enough that her shoulder clipped the door frame and she barely felt it. Dr. Rose was in the medical station, still awake, reviewing the night's readouts on a narrow monitor that cast pale blue light across his face. He looked up before she'd finished her first sentence. "His hand closed around my wrist," she said. "He moved it intentionally, I'm certain." Dr. Rose was already on his feet. "How long ago?" 4 minutes. He didn't say anything else. He was already in the corridor, already moving. The assessment took 40 minutes. She waited outside the room, leaning against the wall, listening to the soft sounds of equipment and Dr. Oze's low, precise voice running through the protocol. When he came out, his expression was careful in a way that told her everything before he spoke. "Come with me," he said. "Not here." In the medical station, he locked the door. She had never seen him do that before. He pulled up the EEG data on his screen and turned it toward her. She didn't understand the waveforms, but she understood the dates. 72 hours of them, dense and climbing. "His brain activity has been at this level for 3 days," Dr. Osei said. In any standard case, we would have initiated a formal waking protocol by now. Reduced sedation, increased sensory stimulation, familiar voices. Clara looked at him. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a moment. He didn't look away. Because Mrs. Harrington holds power of attorney and she has been requesting delays. Her stated reason is that further stability is required. Her actual reason? He paused. I don't have that in writing, but I have been complying. Because I was afraid of losing this position, losing the funding, losing the equipment that keeps him alive. He said it plainly. No performance of remorse, no soft phrasing, just the fact of it, sitting in the room between them. I am telling you because you deserve to know. Clara looked at the climbing lines on the screen. What does the protocol require? She asked. Reduced sedation, sensory stimulation, familiar voices, people he had emotional attachment to before the accident. She kept her voice even. He's been hearing my voice for 5 days. Dr. Rossi looked at her for a long moment. The medical station smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. The heater ticked in the corner. Then he reached for the medication chart and picked up his pen. I'm going to make some adjustments, he said, within my clinical authority, small enough that they won't trigger an immediate review, but they will matter. He glanced up. Don't tell anyone. Not yet. She nodded once. Victor Sloan found her in the service corridor that afternoon. He was carrying nothing, which somehow made him look more dangerous than a briefcase would have. Your thinking time, he said, expires at noon tomorrow. She didn't answer. He left. Lily's room smelled like cedar pencils and the fruity lip balm she kept on her nightstand. Clara knocked once and let herself in. Lily was sitting on the floor with her back against the bed, a piece of paper in her lap. Clara sat down next to her. The floor was hard and cold through her jeans. Can I see? Clara asked. Lily handed it over. 3 figures, drawn in careful crayon. A man in a bed. 2 women standing on either side, each holding one of his hands. Who are the women? Clara asked. Lily pointed to the left figure. Grandma. Then the right. You. She said it matter-of-factly, the way children state geography. But you're on the right side. Clara looked at the drawing for a long moment. In Lily's careful crayon lines, the woman on the right was taller. Her hair was brown, not silver, and she was leaning in, closer to the man in the bed. Thank you for showing me, Clara said quietly. Lily leaned against her shoulder. Outside, a pine branch scraped against the window glass, a dry, persistent sound like something asking to be let in. Clara stared at the drawing and let the question she had been pushing away come forward at last. If Edward woke up, when he woke up, did she tell him? Did she say, I read your letter? I am your sister. I have been sitting beside you for 5 days, because I had nowhere else to go, and because something in me already knew. She did not know if that truth would pull him fully back into the world, or if it would be the thing that broke him. She did not know if that truth would pull him fully back into the world, or if it would be the thing that broke him. She fell asleep with Lily still leaning against her, the drawing still in her lap. She did not hear Margaret in the hallway, but she heard her knock. It came at 7 in the morning. 3 sharp raps, the kind that do not ask permission. Clara opened her eyes, and for one disoriented second she thought she was back in her mother's house in Ohio, and everything here was a dream. Then she heard Lily's voice somewhere down the service corridor, small and alarmed, and she understood that none of it was a dream. She opened the door. Margaret stood in the narrow frame with 2 lodge staff members behind her, both young men, both avoiding Clara's eyes. Margaret wore her pearls. Her hair was already set. She looked like she had never once slept badly in her life. Your employment with this household is terminated, Margaret said. Effective this moment. Your belongings will be collected within the hour. A car is waiting. Clara's hand tightened on the doorframe. The corridor smelled of lemon polish, sharp and thin in the cold morning air. You can't. Clara started. I can, Margaret said. I have. The car will take you to the highway. Down the corridor, Lily's crying rose suddenly. A high, broken sound like a bird flying hard into glass. Clara felt it in her chest more than she heard it. I am not leaving, Clara said. Her voice cracked on the first word. She let it crack. Then she steadied it. Not until I speak with Edward. Edward, Margaret said, cannot speak. He can hear. Something moved behind Margaret's eyes then, something that was not the contempt she normally wore so easily. It was smaller than contempt. It was older. It closed itself off in less than a second, sealed tight like a wound pressing shut, but Clara saw it. Fear. Remove her, Margaret said to the men. Clara did not argue. She turned and she walked, but not toward the front door, not toward the motor court and the waiting car. She walked toward the stairs at the end of the corridor, and she was moving before either of the staff members understood what she was doing. She heard one of them say, "Miss," and then she was already at the staircase, already climbing, her hand on the cold iron railing. Behind her, footsteps, faster now. She was faster. She reached the second-floor landing. Her breath came in short pulls. She turned left, past the closed door of the reading room, past the linen cabinet, and reached the end of the hall, Edward's door. She pushed it open and stopped. Dr. Osei was already inside. He stood beside the monitoring equipment with his back half turned to her, and he had not looked up when she entered because he was not looking at the door. He was looking at the screen, both hands flat on the edge of the table, completely still. His expression was not calm, it was not concerned. It was the expression of a man watching something that should not be possible, watching it happen anyway, in real time, right in front of him, and not quite trusting his own eyes. Clara stepped forward. "Doctor," she said. He finally turned. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he looked back at the screen. "Close the door," he said quietly, "and come here." Clara closed the door. The monitor beside Edward's bed showed a thin green line moving steadily across the screen. Dr. Osei stood without moving, his eyes tracking something Clara couldn't see yet. She came around the side of the station and looked. The line was not thin anymore. It was moving in tight, purposeful peaks. "Since when?" she asked. 40 minutes ago, Dr. Osei said. "Maybe longer, I was asleep." He said it plainly, without apology. "Go sit with him, Clara. Talk to him the way you do. You've heard me? The whole lodge has heard you." He picked up his phone. "Go." She went upstairs. The hallway smelled of pine resin from the fresh garland someone had hung near the landing. A Thursday in late November, barely past 7 in the morning, and the light through the corridor window was the pale gold of new sun on fresh snow. She pushed open Edward's door. The room was quiet. The equipment hummed. The blanket across his chest rose and fell. Clara pulled the chair close, the way she always did. She opened the book she'd brought, the same one she'd been reading all week, and then she didn't read it. She just looked at him. "I found out last night," she said softly, "what you tried to do, finding me. All those years." She pressed her thumbnail into the book's spine. "I don't know how to feel about any of it yet, but I wanted you to know that I'm here." His eyelids moved. She leaned forward, her breath caught. Slowly, not dramatically, not like in films. He opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling first, then his head turned, degree by degree, until he was looking directly at her. He didn't speak, he just looked, the way someone looks at a word they recognize in a foreign language. A sudden, quiet certainty. Clara said, "Edward." Behind her, the door opened. She heard Margaret's voice before she heard her footsteps, a sharp, bitten-off word to someone in the corridor. Then the footsteps. Fast and deliberate. Edward's eyes moved toward the sound. His voice came out rough, scraped raw from a year and a half of silence. But the words were clear. "Hello, Mother." Margaret stopped just inside the doorway. Behind her, Victor Sloane appeared in the corridor, his hand already inside his jacket where he kept his phone. Edward looked back at Clara. "I know who you are," he said. Clara's hands went still at her sides. "How?" "You read me my own letter." The words landed like something dropped from a height. Clara felt them in her chest, a small, hard impact that spread outward. Margaret took one step into the room. Edward's eyes moved to her. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Don't." Margaret stopped. The silence in the room had weight. The monitor beeped once, twice. Outside, wind moved through the pines. And then a sound came from the corridor, running footsteps, small and fast, from very far away, growing louder and louder until they stopped just behind Victor Sloane, who stepped aside without thinking. Lily stood in the doorway. Hair loose, socks, no shoes, chest heaving from the run. She looked past her grandmother, past Clara, past the machines and the white blanket and the morning light. She looked at her father, and she said, in a voice so clear and so full that it filled every corner of that room, a voice no one in the lodge had heard from her in 18 months, "Daddy." For a moment, nobody in the room moved. Edward's eyes, open, blinking, adjusting to the pale November light, found Lily first. His lips moved before his voice came. When it came, it was rough and thin, like paper torn slowly. "Hey, Bug." Lily crossed the room in 4 steps and climbed onto the bed and pressed her face against his shoulder. He raised one arm, slowly, the way a man lifts something very heavy, and held her. Margaret took 1 step forward. Clara stayed by the window. Then Edward turned his head and looked at his mother. His eyes were clear. That was the first thing Clara noticed. Not confused, not grateful. Clear. He said, "Margaret," not Mom, "Margaret." She stopped. He let the quiet sit for a full 10 seconds. The heart monitor beeped. Lily's breathing slowed against his chest. Then he asked his first question. Did you know Clara was alive? Margaret's hand went to her pearls. She did not answer. Did you have the adoption records destroyed? Still nothing. She lifted her chin the way Clara had watched her do a dozen times. The gesture that was supposed to end conversations. Did you delay my waking protocol? 3 questions. No raised voice. No trembling. He sounded exactly like what he was, a man who had run a bank since he was 22 and knew that silence, aimed correctly, cuts deeper than anything you can say. Margaret said, everything I did was to protect this family. Edward said, I know. He let that sit. Then, Victor, I need a document. Victor Sloane was still in the doorway. He looked at Margaret. He looked at Edward. Something shifted in his face, a small private calculation, and then he opened his leather portfolio and held out a legal pad and a pen. Edward's hand shook when he reached for it. Clara stepped forward without being asked and held the pad steady. She didn't look at Margaret. She looked at Edward's hand and held the pad level while he wrote 4 lines, his signature at the bottom. Dr. Jose moved to the bedside and signed below it. Margaret picked up her handbag from the chair by the door, the chair she had sat in every single day for 18 months. She walked out without another word. Her heels clicked down the corridor, and then went silent on the staircase carpet. In the motor court, 2 men she had employed for 6 years received a message and stepped back from the car. She opened the door herself. The car moved down the lodge road and disappeared into the snow. The room was very quiet. Lily had fallen asleep against Edward's shoulder, one hand fisted in the blanket. Edward looked at Clara. Donna wrote to me once, he said. Years ago. She told me you were kind. I was trying to find you when the accident happened. Clara's throat tightened. She wrote to you? She wanted me to reach you before she died. A pause. I was too slow. Clara looked at him for a moment. Then she said, she made sure I found you instead. She reached into her coat pocket and set the cedar box on the bed between them. Inside, beneath the letters and the old photograph of young Margaret, was one more thing, a newspaper clipping, printed on plain paper, of Edward cutting a ribbon at a new bank branch in Denver. Donna had drawn a small arrow pointing at his face. In her careful schoolteacher's hand she had written in the margin, your brother. He has your eyes. They looked at it together. Lily stirred, opened her eyes, looked at Clara. Are you staying? Clara looked at Edward. He said, she's family. Outside, the first real snow of the season was coming down over the Rockies, covering the lodge road, covering the tire tracks of a car already gone, covering everything equally and without judgment, the way snow does, the way a mother's love is supposed to, but sometimes, heartbreakingly, does not. Clara sat down on the edge of the bed. For the first time since her mother died, she did not feel alone.